There it is.
Down before we can finish these.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a couple of agenda adjustments tonight. There'll be no student of the month or student advisory report, and this meeting is being videotaped. I ask for a motion to suspend the regular meeting, open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
And open the public hearing for the fiscal year 20 budget and waive the reading of the public notice. Second by Hanover. All in favor? Any discussion? Okay. Anybody want to comment on the fiscal year budget, 20 budget proposal? No?
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
Thank you. Members of the committee, I want to thank Jim Coughlin for working as we predicted, although a little bit later than a little bit later than expected. We saw the governor's budget get posted earlier this afternoon around 4 o'clock. That's a good first step. Then the next step is when will we see, based on that budget, what the minimum contributions would be for each community. So if there are no questions of substance on the budget presentation that I made to you in December, the news worth sharing this evening is based on the governor's budget proposal from earlier this afternoon. We would realize an increase of Chapter 70 aid in the vicinity of about $100,000, which is a long time that we would have seen a spike, given that our in-district enrollment is down. I would have told you last month that our plan would be to level fund Chapter 70. So I would take that as, while it's preliminary, certainly, and it has to go through the same budgetary process that you're all well aware of, that's good news. So in the information that the ink is just drying on, what you would see from Jim's documentation is, again, it's the usual packet of information, and this is something that we can go through certainly prior to any certification vote in February. But we want to supply anyone who's interested with how we're calculating the numbers, how the regional agreement applies to the assessments. So the assumptions that are being made in these numbers are, first, that the governor's Chapter 70 number would be used. So there's a positive variance of $105,847. That's good. I also told you last month that we're seeing an increase in non-resident tuition. That number has stayed the same since we last talked. We were estimating regional transportation. Jim, would you have a spare copy for George? Hi, George. You can pass one. Yeah, thank you. We're estimating regional transportation to be 70% of our transportation costs from end of year fiscal 18. That accounts for about $489,000. So when we factor all of that in, with those assumptions being made, and with the minimum contribution numbers now published based on the governor's budget, we can make projections for each town. If I were to direct your attention to
We're on the worksheet with the red.
this is the portrait worksheet with preliminary assessments fiscal 20 at the top. If I were to direct your attention to page 5, page 5 will probably give you the straight to the point information when you want to do a 1-year look back. So if you locate your community, and I will go for the benefit of those that don't have this document in front of them, based on those assumptions that I've made and based on the budget that was presented to you last month, you can find your community and see what the variance would be. So for Abington's assessment would drop by $241,432. Cohasset's assessment would increase by $2,398, or 4.5%. Hanover's assessment would drop by $57,323, or the equivalent of 7.51%. Hanson's assessment would increase by $9,167, or 0.92%. Norwell's assessment would increase by $40,012 or 14.48%. Rockland's assessment would increase by $83,806 or 4.54%. Situate's assessment would increase by $22,635 or 2.94%, and Whitman's assessment would increase by $48,293 or 3.1%. In the aggregate, factoring in all of those assessments at the bottom, what this means is that we would be bringing forward a budget that has a 3.1% overall increase, yet the total amount of dollars that we are assessing to our 8 communities would be $92,444 less. So we have some communities that went up, and certainly we had a couple of communities that went down. Does enrollment play a role? Yes. Is it a clean formula? We know that it's not. But in essence, the reason for us delaying this meeting for January, as we've done in the last couple of years, was so that we at least had this information this evening. It's one more piece of the puzzle, of course. But tonight we don't certify a budget. Tonight is simply the next step in getting information out. And what would typically happen is that based on these assumptions, Jim would prepare a document on behalf of the district that would go to our communities, and we would begin the process of informing our towns of this information as you well know, they're in the process of building their budget. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the latest, and if it prompts any questions from the committee or anyone else, we'd be happy to try to answer.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Maybe I'm just lost in this here. I just had one thing. Tom, what would be the cost per student for Rockland now? Would just be a number. What page would that be on?
Yeah.
There is no cost per student calculation that's being done, because it is all over the place, and the minimum contribution that kicks in through the DESE calculation is all over the place, so there is no standard number. We can do the calculation if you think that's something that you want to present.
Well, that's just the question that they always ask. They don't get into the whole percentages. They always ask, well, what's it costing us per student?
$12,125. If I take the 159 kids and I divide that into the projected assessment that you have on page 5, that's the breakdown. Certainly a more complicated answer in terms of how that is arrived at, but backing it out, that's what we could say, $12,125.
Yeah, a comment on that. I do the exact same thing at town meeting, because I divide, our assessment by the number of students, and like Whitman, it comes out to be $11,068. But also included in the total assessment to the town is our capital, the capital assessments to the town when we had the window and roof project. So it kind of misleads a little bit, because like in Whitman-Hanson, any building project to the region is taken out, and it's an article in our town meeting warrant. So it's taken away. So if you're to take away your capital cost, it will lower it a bit.
Plus, as Dan mentioned, as Tom will be presenting to local finance committees, there's always a sheet of paper that's included in the package that represents about $2 million of costs that are in our budget that are not normally in a school budget. Health insurance, pensions, and so forth, that are usually outside of the school budget. So if we back that number out, then the cost per pupil would actually be lower. But again, that's part of the regional school district budget process.
That's just the question that they always,
Yeah.
That's their first question they ask, because.
Right, because they're pitching what we're charging per student to the school.
To what the town actually pays per student.
We're a little bit different, Whitman-Hanson, we're a region, so we don't pay, they have the same situation we do as far as paying their whole bed and capital costs and stuff.
Right.
But I would say, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a good comment and a good question and a good comment, because if we ever needed to do, if anyone was interested in apples to apples, we could take a town's share of capital and a town's share of debt, subtract it out of their assessment, and then do the division again. So in other words, if we wanted to find a truer per pupil cost, because if we're doing per pupil cost, if you're suggesting that in other communities, if they calculate a per pupil cost, it has no bearing on capital. You put on a new roof, they don't factor that into the per pupil educational costs. So when people are asking that question, we can drill down if we have to. So that 12,125 would be lower if you divorce capital and debt from that number. So depending on the question, we can definitely refine an answer to make sure that it's a fair comparison.
Looking at the town's view, it's still all one figure.
Yeah, they're looking at that one number.
Into it.
It's true.
So that, like
Yeah.
Norwell, Dan was saying 11 grand for his, Norwell's almost 18 grand.
That's right.
For 18 kids, so volume, you get a discount.
For better or, for better or worse, it is one number, and that's just the way that the business is done. But it's a good question.
Well, for the common person, they just don't get into the whole budget. They
No.
want to understand it also. They just want to know what it is per
Yep.
person compared to what, you know.
Absolutely.
They're just looking at a number.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Any more discussion or comments?
Yeah, just one other comment, Tom, these are assessments, these are preliminary assessments. When will we have the hard, in other words, we gotta put in an Article 2, and in our town, right, the finance committee, when is the hard number gonna be?
From this point forward, it's at the discretion of this committee. With tonight's public hearing, and with us needing to certify a budget no later than 45 days before the first town meeting, this would likely be an action item for the committee at our February meeting. If the committee certifies the total budget number, and it's with the understanding that we're basing it on these assumptions, and we know that there's always an element of risk. We know that there was maybe 10 years ago when there was maybe it was just pre-recession, I think with Romney administration, there was an attempt to overhaul Chapter 70. There was some ripples with how Chapter 70 was calculated. I think maybe we're going back maybe 10 years for that. Because typically you can assume that the governor's number would be the floor, not the ceiling. You could bank on that. So here we see that we're projecting, the governor's projecting an increase. If we factor that number in, maybe the number, when the legislature finishes its business down later in the spring, maybe that number will be different. But we always have to take that risk as we move forward. And as we all know, you can certify a higher number, and then depending on where things go, this committee could always take subsequent action. I don't anticipate that happening, but that would be that's always your.
And if we certify these assessments to the town and say something happens where, let's say Whitman's increase from 48 to 48.3.
Yep.
Goes to 49, right? If we've already certified it, do we end up taking it out of our?
When we certify, that's it. All you can do is go down.
Right, so
Yeah.
consequently, if it does cost us more, we're gonna have to backfill.
Sure.
Yeah.
Regional transportation is a perfect example that
Yeah.
is not protected like Chapter 70 dollars are protected. If there was a budget crisis and there had to be 9C cuts, there had to be something that was cut, or there was a projection. If our 70% projection was inaccurate and we ended up getting 59%, well, then we would be responsible for making up the difference, for curtailing costs where we could. That hasn't happened, and I think the trajectory is getting better. But I believe that regional transportation was level funded in the governor's budget proposal. So if it's level funded and everyone's costs are going up, there's a moment of pause to say, maybe not. The governor's projections for regional transportation, that'd be more of a wait and see. Whereas with Chapter 70, I think at this moment we're taking a rosier look. So again, it's very important to say that 1 month ago, or even last night talking at Whitman Finance Committee, these numbers didn't exist, and so we were talking about assuming a level-funded Chapter 70. So I think there's cautious optimism that this increase in state aid has a direct positive impact on our communities.
Yeah, because I'll probably give Frank a copy of this sheet here, telling him that it's the preliminary numbers, but we're like 89% pretty much sure. That's it.
I think so, unless there was if there was ever a collective concern that if we're too rosy with our projected revenue, then that would be a reason to scale it back. But at this point, the numbers that Jim has on this sheet are the ones that we would be bringing to you for recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, also to address Dan, last year when we met in January, they had published the Chapter 70 number at $4,319,000. And as Tom and I are going back and forth with our projections and revenue projections over the last couple of months, Tom had a different number than my number, and what had happened was that the state actually had increased the Chapter 70 money, like in July. You know, we worked our budget off of what was available in January, and you certified it in February. The state came through and gave us an extra $25,000.
Right.
It was,
Right, because that came up the last payment.
right, so what ended up happening was that they gave us an extra money, and now that will just add to a surplus, potential surplus this year. Now, they could have had some crisis where they could have lowered that money, and we pretty much had certified a higher number, and we have to live with that, and if there's any issue, we take it out as, you know, any sort of E&D or whatever, but again, we only can budget what we know about right now, so these are the numbers from the budget, from the governor today, so, these are part of the presentation.
If you're too conservative with the projections, it puts more burden on local communities. If you're too risky, we have never been in that position, we know, and I wouldn't advise that we are. But the next step is the House Ways and Means Committee comes out with its budget, I think, in April. So we know this is the beginning of a 4 or 5 month conversation. But this number is really what is going to get the ball rolling, and it ends up in a conference committee. So depending on the year and depending on what the issues of the day are, this is something that may not, you know, we oftentimes see in the news that budgets don't get resolved prior to, you know, July 1st or very late into the spring or early summer. But in any event, yeah, that's the best information we have up to the moment.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Any more discussion? Anybody else? No? All right, ask for motion to close the public hearing and return to the regular meeting
Make a
agenda.
motion. Close the
Motion made by
public
Rockland,
Second.
second by Situate. Okay, thank you. All right.
You want to vote on that, Chris?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Oh, wait, we need a vote.
Oh, right.
To close.
A vote to close the,
Roll call,
meeting?
right? Does it have to be roll call?
No.
It can be voice.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any discussion? No? Thank you. Public comments? Gotta mention it, right?
Anything else?
Minutes, motion made by Situate, second by Hanover. All in favor? Any discussion? So I guess we'll move on right to the treasury reports. Jim?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your package, we have the treasury report for December 31st. Sports pictures abound on the front cover. All the winter teams are in full action. And thank you to a couple parents. There's a Facebook page for the Viking sports, and a couple of the parents are out there at all these events taking pictures and so forth and posting, and you know, Donna was down there tonight taking pictures of girls' action against Norfolk Vegas, so it's a nice little public thing if you're on Facebook to see all the action that's going on with all the athletes. Our first page with the cash balances, again, through December 31st overall, cash balances in our operating accounts total $5.2 million, pretty healthy compared to, we were up a couple $100,000 where we finished last fiscal year, so things are going well. OPEB reserve is at $658,000. Again, chugging along and growing by the day, which is a good thing. Page 2 has the revenue for the month of December. Again, the billings for December went out on November 1st, maybe a couple days after November 1st. And by the time all the bills get circled through the town's warrant payable types of situations, a lot of the checks came in the 1st of December. So during the month of December, we received $1.392 million of assessments from all of our member towns. Situate and Whitman had paid early back in November, so they were recorded last month. So everybody, all of our towns have paid their assessments through the first 6 months of the year, so everything's going well. Other income that we have during the course of the year, of course, is Chapter 70, which keeps coming in $361,000 per month, so everything's well. We have a grand total of income of $1.7 million for the month of December. Next page is our expenses. And again, everything is going well. For the month of December, we had $1.114 million of expenditures. Again, it's like clockwork. A lot of the information that comes through, it's repetitive. It's with the holidays coming up, with the winter break, the purchasing from a lot of the teachers was a little slow in anticipation of the winter break, and it'll start picking up again in January. But spending is under control. Payable side of things, Sylvia's doing a great job managing all the systems. We do have a new online system where the purchase orders are done electronically on certain individuals. We're still working out the kinks in the purchase order system, but we're in the 21st century with that, and we're moving forward. Payroll, again, the fact that the budget process is just about finished, Tricia Murphy will be very happy. She's run multiple spreadsheets back and forth as far as the budget process. So now that we have a solid number, she can move on to other things such as the ACA reporting, which is always a fun thing that is due at the end of January. So again, we're busy in the business office, and Tricia and Sylvia do a fabulous job. Overall, we have no issues from a budget standpoint. We monitor where we are budget-wise, so everything's going well and on target. So that's pretty much the report for this month.
Great, thanks, Jim. I get a motion for the treasurer's report?
Motion to accept as read.
Motion made by Rockland, second. George, go ahead. All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Jim, anything else?
Yeah, we have no budget transfers for this month, so everything else is good.
Great. Chairman, nothing from the chairman tonight. There are no subcommittee reports to report, so I'll turn it over to the Superintendent Director.
Thank you,
Tom?
Mr. Chairman. Committee members, document 4 in your packet is it's kind of my score at halftime, the mid-year report on the goals that you approved for me back in the fall. Generally pleased how things are going. You'll hear a presentation from Sandy a little bit later where she talks about co-op placement, and that is something that we continue to set as a goal, third-party credentialing, co-op placement. So that's there for your review, and I'll give you a final report later in the spring. The second item, Mr. Chairman, I have is just an awareness raising regarding the potential calendar changes for 2019 and 2020. This is not an action item for tonight, but I'll be bringing you a recommendation based on recent changes to our collective bargaining agreement that would have us starting school prior to Labor Day. We would start school on Tuesday, August 27th for a 3-day week, which would be August 27, 28, and 29. We would start the school year with a delayed start for students. The Friday going into Labor Day weekend, there would be no school.
So you'd be going Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
That's correct, Jack, yeah. And then based on where the holidays are falling, Christmas falls on a Wednesday, so I'll also be recommending that we do not open for Monday, December 23rd. What we're waiting on, quite honestly, is for the state to publish. It's not going to matter for the school committee's approval of a calendar, but we're waiting on the state to come out with projected MCAS testing dates, because we have to make sure that our sophomores are scheduled in their academic classes when MCAS testing is set by the state. You can't mess around with those dates. So we hope that we'll have that information soon. But for the next meeting, or prior to the next meeting, I'll send you a draft. And this is something that as a committee we have typically taken action on at our February or March meetings. But because of the potential for the shift at the beginning, I've also put out a preliminary notice to parents, alerting them as well. You know, it's the change of the calendar year. If people are planning their summers or late summers, this is a big enough deal to share. So there'll be more info on the 2019-2020 calendar next month. Item 3, I want to let you know that on January 8th, I attended a meeting in New Bedford focused around awareness raising for the Mass Association of School Committees and the Mass Association of School Superintendents, talking about changes to the Chapter 70 formula. So while the budget process is going to move forward over the next several months, and we've seen the first chapter in this novel, There's also going to be conversation around the need to make changes to the overall formula that we know from casual reading of the newspaper and other media is something that hasn't been touched since ed reform was passed in 1993. So this forum was largely focused on the needs of some big urban districts: Fall River, Taunton, Attleboro, New Bedford. The message is still the same, that there've got to be adjustments. So it certainly was informative, and I thought it was well attended. There were co-sponsored regional events that occurred in Fitchburg and Malden, I believe, on the same night. So as you hear about the Chapter 70 funding formula, this could be the year that the legislature, you might recall the legislature attempted to make statutory changes, but it did not end up going anywhere. I'm sensing that there's momentum for change. So what do I mean by that? It could mean that, for instance, in the formula, the legislature agrees that vocational schools will get state funding based on a certain percentage of special education students, which is generally higher than in regular schools. That's just one factor. Then people want to talk about things like health insurance. The cost of health insurance has gone up in the last 25 years. It has far outpaced what the formula has baked in for what school districts would need. Special education, health insurance, low-income students, English language learners. That's where I think a lot of the attention is going to be. So along with a typical budget year of looking to see where the number's going to land for state aid, this might also be the year for changes to the law. So again, I'll certainly keep you apprised of what I'm hearing as we make our way through this legislative session.
Yeah, but one that I noticed in today's budget under his comments, he put a lot more money into the smaller grades with the students that needed language help and so forth. He made a comment that he actually put more money, and the figures show it
Yes.
as well for those districts like Boston and
Right.
Fall River, New Bedford, that have that type of student.
In the same way that we would say with confidence, our school is more expensive to operate in the area of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the formula and you see vocational, you would expect that we're hiring. Our teaching ranks they bring more experience to the job, so there's more money baked in. There's more money baked in for equipment, and for urban school districts that might have higher ELL populations, it's expensive to have specialists to help them meet the same curriculum standards as other students. So you're right. It is going to be about prioritization and what do they put into the law to make sure that. How do you control for inflation?
I'm surprised he didn't mention vocational education at all in his
Yeah.
chatter.
So we'll see where that takes us.
And another thing, Tom, if I'm not mistaken, in the budget as far as the formula in Chapter 70, isn't it an advantage to be regionalized? That the state was looking for schools to regionalize, go to the save cost, and they kind of like threw money. Like Whitman-Hanson gets a pretty large portion of Chapter 70 because we're regionalized. I imagine.
I think the struggle there, Dan, is that towns who regionalized back in the day
Yeah.
aren't necessarily seeing the promise, the sustained promise of the benefits of regionalization,
Exactly.
which over time, I don't need to tell you, have resulted in more pressure at the local level.
Right.
So I'm not sure, I haven't had the chance to do a deeper dive. Regional transportation is a sure sign whether or not regional schools will be supported. The bigger that line, the lower the assessments for the communities in that region. So that's a line we always keep a close eye on. And we lock arms with regular regional school districts because it's the same statute funding. That's one thing that we can all say we have in common, regional schools in terms of transportation. That if that line is not funded adequately.
I'm just curious, and is there any vocational school that isn't regionalized, by the way?
There are several city vocational
cities,
schools. So vocational schools are classified as our regionals. Smith out in Northampton is a unique independent school. They take students from multiple communities, but Smith is a slightly unique classification.
Boston as well.
And then you have city schools like Madison Park or Lynn Tech, and then you have comprehensive schools with Chapter 74 programs like Silver Lake. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just amazed at the out-of-district towns that ask their students to come here.
Yeah.
It's good for us, the fact that it shows that they have a lot of faith in our education.
And it speaks to what we've said for years, which is that there's a growing demand for what we offer.
Yeah, there was one other comment, and I don't know how to figure it out because I'm not familiar with it, but he made this, a comment in the budget line that schools that have now adopted agricultural programs cannot count it to the total student cost or the thing, unless it was enacted before 1994 or something. I didn't get into it too deep. I ran out of time to cover everything. But,
I'll take a closer look, Bob. I did not see
It made me think
that.
about hours where we're just starting it, whether it's going to affect us at all.
Yeah.
So.
They may have been making reference to special statutes that involve agricultural schools like Norfolk and Bristol, but I can take a closer
Yeah.
look at that. Yeah. I'm not sure it'd be something at the programmatic level, maybe the type of school, which is the other type of, the agricultural schools we have in the
And Tom,
state.
one other comment, we had a Mass Municipal Association conference this weekend, and at a selectmen's meeting, one of the subjects, we had somebody from the state educational, and talked about the biggest problem in a lot of the towns' budgets are the cost of schools, education.
Certainly.
It's the biggest, 60 to 65% of their budget goes into the school system, right? And like Whitman has, Whitman Hanson, South Shore Tech, and Norfolk Ed, right? That being said, they were talking about how to keep the cost of education down, because that, I jumped right in. And I talked about unfunded mandates, and they said, well, we're looking at them. I said, no. I said, who should be looking at them? Superintendents of school systems and teachers. Because they're the ones that are on the front line, and they can tell you whether or not they are needed or they're not needed. And if they're needed, I think you should be funded. And she said, I'll take that under advisement. Probably on deaf ears, but I had to say.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Mr. Chairman, I'll now defer to our administrators who can offer some comments as to what's going on here at the school.
Kids are close to the fireplace.
Yeah, right.
Good work.
Safety first.
Good policy.
Good evening, committee, Superintendent Keating, Treasurer Coughlin, community. Before I begin, I'm going to do my very best to channel Cody Campbell, who is not with us this evening. We wish he were, but he'll be back next time. But it's important for us to celebrate the most important people in our building, our students, and they are vibrant and very busy. I can tell you that we've had some exciting things going on with our co-curricular organizations, our Skills USA organization under the leadership of Bob Foley, and supported at the state level, and supported in our building through Lisa Bellantoni, is active, vibrant, and getting ready for all of our local testing to prepare for regional testing in hopes of being statewide champs and hopefully sending some kids to nationals later in the summer. So that those activities are happening in the building, in fact, this week. The FFA state student representatives were in our building last week. FFA is Future Farmers of America, and we will be Future Farmers of America very soon. We have students in our horticulture program who are getting excited about participating in the state convention. They actually, I think they all want to go, so we'll see if we can send them all or not. The building is bustling with student athletes. They are in the throes of their seasons. The students really, they look great in the hallways on their days when they're going off to games, and it's really nice to see students sort of combining their understanding of attitude, effort, and academics as all part of sportsmanship, and that culture is present in our building. So that is exciting. Our student government organization is getting ready for the next holiday. So the Valentine's Day chocolates and flowers sale is underway. If you want to support your colleagues, it's $1 for a flower, $2 for chocolates. And so that, I think that will be wrapped up before your next meeting. So get them while they're hot. They're available at lunch. And you will be hearing likely next month a lot more about our spring service trip that we are looking to have on the heels of the very successful trip that the kids did to New Jersey last year. So the building is abundant with things rich and great in the classroom as well, and this is from me. I can tell you that in the walkthroughs and observations that I've done in the last month, you should pat yourselves on the back for your recent hires, because our new faculty are doing a great job in their ability to connect with our students personally and use the technology and content knowledge that they have to make rich, rewarding classrooms. So many thanks to those new teachers as well. So things are going well all over the place, students and teachers. So I am here today to talk specifically a little bit about some information about students who are on co-op and who's planning on going to college. Where are we now? So let me get started with that. I can tell you that we have, I'm going to stand over here a little bit, I don't want to move around too much, that we currently have 58 students employed. And this is pretty much real-time information. This changes, if you go onto our spreadsheet, every time you open it up, the information changes a little bit. It's kind of exciting to see the numbers going up for how many hours they've worked or how much money they're earning. So we currently have $13.22 per hour, and they have, as of the last time I opened it up, it was $42,725.52 earned. I'm pretty sure that if I open up tomorrow, it's going to be more. So that's the seniors. The juniors, they are excited about opportunities for co-op, in great part thanks to the co-op team of teacher leaders and Keith Boyle. They are celebrating their classmates as they have gone out to co-op, and they're eager to get out as well. So we had 2 meetings this week and last week. We are working to place students who are in their junior year as early as February 4th. These are our high flyers, our kids who are really succeeding in class and in shop and are ready to work. Approximately 15 to 20 juniors report that they currently are in jobs that can transfer into co-op placements. We'll work on placing them first. There were another 60 plus students who showed up who are just interested in getting out on co-op this spring. Likelihood of placing all of those students in their junior year at the standards that we're setting for juniors is probably not going to be 60, though we have that many students interested, and 15 to 20 juniors placed in jobs that could be co-op placements is exciting in terms of the tenor of their attitude towards co-op, and can really push our conversations around getting licenses and keeping grades up and being ready for September of senior year. So, who's going? This is a little bit of information about who's going from each program. Take a look at the numbers there. You can see how our programs are doing, encouraging kids to get out the door, finding placements for them. The horticulture program, as you know, doesn't have juniors and seniors, so they don't have students out on co-op yet, although we get phone calls for it every day. And the 58 students out on co-op represents 37% of the class of 2000. And I don't know why I put 20, it's the class of 2019. Getting ahead of myself. Any questions so far?
Sam, the juniors, they have to be honor roll students?
They have to be, they don't have to be quite honor roll. It says 80 in their academics and 75 in their academics, 80 in their shop setting. Other questions? And you wonder where they're working? All over the place. So we really represent a cross-section of industry. We represent a cross-section of types of employers, from large employers with many sites and franchises to mom and pop shops as well. I'd be happy to send you an email link with this slideshow if you want to take a little bit closer look at some of those locations.
Sandy, some of these employers are ones that we, the school, has built a relationship with, and in other cases it's the student initiative.
It's a two-way street, absolutely. So our current juniors are currently employed. They may not be employed at one of these locations. They could be employed at a location where they sought out a job on their own, and then we will seek to build that relationship. Other locations are places where we've gone to time and time again. We have a long-term relationship. Bend and Gear, we have a long-term relationship with. Sullivan Tire, we have a long-term relationship with. Not to leave others out, but we have different kinds of relationships. And these are folks that we'll encourage to become part of our school at our advisory events, a part of our school during our Credit for Life events. So they are a part of our school community more and more each year.
Yeah, I noticed there's quite a few of graduates of years ago that are hiring students there as well.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And so a quick transition to start thinking about our seniors and who's going to college, who's applying to college, where are they applying, and who's accepting them.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I met a young fellow the other day, I guess the day before or that morning, he had notified Mass Maritime that he was accepted. He was out on co-op working at the time I saw him, and he was flying high.
That's great news. It's always fun to hear. And so we've had 18 students with those sentiments at this point. So they've been excited to get notification they've been accepted to colleges. There are 9 female and 9 male, and they represent 9 of our programs. So a really good cross-section of our school. No imbalances there. Of those 18 students, there were 41 acceptances thus far, so far. We are only in January. There's a long way to go. We have 29 colleges and universities represented, and there are 14 students participating in the on-the-spot acceptance for a 2-year college with Massasoit on Friday. So as of Friday afternoon, we could have 21% of our senior class accepted to 2 or 4-year colleges.
And Sandy, these are most likely students who applied early action to colleges,
Yes.
whereas the regular deadline is a little later in the winter.
Most students are not going to be finding out they'll find out within the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So this is really an early report. So a question that we ask ourselves a lot so that we can learn about those locations in order to support our students being successful there, are what post-secondary colleges are students applying to and where are they being accepted? So this gives you a little bit of information about the Massachusetts state schools that our students are applying to and being accepted at, the private schools in Massachusetts that they are applying to and being accepted at, as well as the out-of-state colleges and universities that they're applying to and being accepted at. The farthest one is Michigan, is in Michigan. Most of them are New England regional schools. Again, a lot to take in on a slideshow. Happy to share this with
I have
Susan.
one question.
Sure.
A lot of times, like my wife and I would run to a restaurant or something like that, they're always looking for help. I think what we ought to do is have some business cards made up for the schools so that, like a lot of times I'll see help wanted and then I'll talk to the manager and say, yeah, we're looking for someone and for the kitchen or whatever, and I would give them my South Shore Vocational card,
Mhm.
right? I'm thinking maybe we should have cards to go, a number to go to the direct office for co-op students.
Mhm.
Print it up, so if we each have them and we're someplace we can hand them out. I know my sister-in-law worked for a company and they were looking for somebody in metal fab, I believe, you know, and I said, you call South Shore Vocational, see if they can help you out, looking for an employee, if they needed somebody. So, but I'm saying, if we had business cards, I could might be an idea, you know, give them out,
It'd be
get more
very-
seniors
yeah.
out there working.
Very
I don't want to
easy.
speak for the superintendent, but we could probably have that done for you in
Probably.
short order.
Huh?
Like a generic
Yeah.
card.
We know people.
You know, I mean,
Know where to get it
just-
printed?
Yeah.
I'm handing out mine.
Right, you're just looking to cut out a step. If you could hand a card out that simply directed that employer
Right to where they
to,
need to go,
to
right.
Keith and others that are working on helping kids find jobs.
They
Sure.
usually call me and then I give them Sue's number and then Sue
Right.
gives it to her, you know, it's like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, yeah. No,
And
that's-
now that we have Keith Boyle on board as our vocational coordinator with one of his work priorities as
Right, yeah.
co-op, we can just get you some copies of his card and you can have both.
Yeah.
Have one other one, Sam.
Sure.
You would mention about the programs. Is the horticulture gonna have, for Valentine's, are they gonna have one of the sell-off specials for bouquets?
They sure are, and we'll make sure that you get your link a little early, all right? Yeah, no, they will have a sale of flowers, and in fact, they sent out a promo today about what they'll be doing.
Yeah, probably.
Now we want,
Yeah, put on
weight
weight.
coaches.
I know that the last 2 holidays, they've done great.
I have done, a couple years ago, it was really good.
I think this is my last slide. So in sum, our students have been accepted at 7 state schools, 7 private schools in Massachusetts, and 12 out-of-state schools. And that is the halftime score, and truly it's the halftime score of co-op and college. So we've got a long way to go in terms of placing students in co-op positions and for students to be accepted at. So we'll do an update as we get later in the spring. I'd also really like to celebrate those students who are going straight to work. And talk about where those students are going straight to work. I'd like that to be an equal celebration to students going off to college.
Does Keith also do, help Bob with skills?
Everything that we do here at South Shore Tech is all hands on deck. If you're looking for a point person for skills, it's Bob. If you're looking for a point person on co-op, it's Keith.
Okay, but they both work.
When a student goes on a co-op job, does his boss critique him and let you know how he's doing?
Yes, that's a big part of what the office has to manage, Dan, which is the regular feedback from employers. We ask them to fill out an assessment form, yeah.
Good.
Do you find that the kids going on to college are staying in their major or close to it, or are they spreading out?
Ooh, I couldn't speak to that from I have actually looked at data on that, but off the top of my head, I couldn't speak to that from a data viewpoint, but I would say some do, and some don't.
Okay, that's fair. That's about what I expected. So, you know, I just wasn't sure, because I always look at the board out there where kids are going to college, the different schools, and I go, wow,
That's certainly something that we could pull together for you.
just curious, just wondered.
I think it's an important question. It is something that we're going to be looking at. We've got some data on the classes of 2006 to 2013 that we can take a look at. And the most important question underneath all college-bound students' questions that I would want to make sure we ask is, you know, to what extent did we prepare you? You know, is there something that we did not do? And in the years we've been able to ask that question, I haven't had anybody come up with something sizable in terms of the experiences or the content, which is good.
Yeah.
We just have to keep asking that
I
question.
still don't know what I want to do when I
Yeah,
grow up.
right,
But,
that's right.
you know, I started in wood technology and ended up in law enforcement, so life takes you in different directions. But I was just curious,
Yeah.
walking out this door, where are they going?
Right.
I didn't want to work for a living anymore.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
Wise guy.
I will say, I can just tell you a brief story, talking about co-op. We have one of my former coach football here, went to college up in Endicott, and because of his electrical background here, he was able to work maintenance at night over there, change balusters and things like that there up at the school, and he was able to get a good part-time job out of it while he was there all 4 years.
Beautiful.
So,
Nice, yeah. That worked out.
It works.
Part of his success, yeah, absolutely.
Just remember, only God and electricians make light.
I've heard that a couple of times.
Yeah, yeah.
And you'll
It's a good one.
continue to hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's it? Okay. We'll move on to new business.
Thank you. Thanks for handing it back over, yes. Members of the committee, I'm asking for authorization and your approval to make an adjustment to our facilities fee structure as it pertains to when we rent the building after hours. We've had a fixed custodial rate in our fee structure for a while. And while I will eventually come to you with some other recommendations on changing the fee structure, I'd ask that we change the fee structure from what is currently now, which is a fixed $32 an hour rate, to essentially indexed language. In other words, I would like to be able to charge whatever the time and a half rate is for a nighttime custodian, so that as those rates increase, that language can just grow with it. I'm sure at the time that the $32 an hour was put in, it was probably assuming that custodians work full-time. If we're renting, if someone's using the building, let's say on a Saturday or after, it would most likely be a weekend, to be perfectly honest, that those rates reflect recovery costs for putting a staff person in the building, which is a standard practice in our school, that we would have a staff person here. So that is my recommendation, and I'd ask that we can make that adjustment for any transactions going forward.
Okay. I so moved.
Motion made by Situate, second by,
I have a question.
oh, go ahead, Bob.
Is that in policy, Tom, or is that separate from policy?
What's in policy, Bob, is that the committee would have to agree to make the change.
Okay, so we don't have to do it twice?
I don't believe we do. It's written as a separate, it's not written into the policy, it's a
Okay.
separate, it's like a menu of fees.
All right.
And my question, Tom, is that if we only charge what it costs for a custodian, does the school make any money on it?
Yes, so there are additional rental costs with regard to whether you're renting the gym or the fields or a classroom. So my recommended change here is just so that we're staying on par. We're not making any money off of the labor.
Okay.
We're looking to just cover the costs there.
Cover the cost of the custodian cleaning up
Yes.
afterwards and being here.
Exactly, and depending on the need, and depending on the event, we would, in contracting with the other party, we would assess whether or not a custodian would need to stay, 2 hours after or an hour before or after, and that would all be determined in advance. That's why one of the things that I want to look at more comprehensively is the rest of our fee structure, which we haven't looked at in a while. But this is just low-hanging fruit that would say, if the time and a half rate is exceeding what we're charging, it should at least be what the going rate is. Yeah.
I'll second it, by the way.
Second by Whitman.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? All right, thank you. Next up, I ask for a motion for the surplus item.
So moved.
Motion made by Hanover, second by Situate. Any discussion? Oh, all in favor? Sorry, any discussion? Thank you.
You're right, that's good.
Warrants.
Warrants. Make a motion that we approve warrant number 12, warrant 1200, warrant 12A, warrant 12B, warrant 13, and warrant 13A for a total of $841,783.67.
So moved.
Second by Whitman. Any discussion? All in favor? Any requests for action?
Just a comment, last night's FinCom meeting with Tom, and we went there, and they had to say that after Tom's presentation, he was probably the most cleared, his presentation was very professional, very clear to understand. I think they said that while you were there, right?
They fed us, Dan. I had a meatball parmesan bomb that it
you
was
make that?
Oh, it was delicious. Yes. So
Sweet.
I was at
Did you
home.
make that?
It was great. Pardon me.
Did you bring that?
No, they had it. They offered me
They
one.
never had it when I was chair there.
Yeah.
But they were very, they loved the fact that the way Tom did his
Sorry.
presentation, thought it was very professional.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it looked good.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one, it's not for action, it's status, and this goes to Jim. What's the status of our audit, Jim? He was
The audit,
supposed to be back to us by now.
yeah, the audit is, it's in Bruce's hands with worksheets, and we're on, again, we're talking about February or March based upon the timing of the meetings, what's going on in February, which is best for the caseload of the agendas, so we'll have them in shortly.
Bob?
Yeah, I just had a question. I didn't know this was the first night Mark wasn't gonna speak, but is anything going on with school council? If school council has
We
started?
meet every Wednesday, you folks meet, so we met this afternoon, working on the school improvement plan, we're working on, we just did transportation last month and looking at our facilities, and so we're moving forward with school council every month.
Thank you, I just haven't heard, didn't know anything, that's all. Thanks.
And Mr. Chairman, I know it's under request for action, but with these assessment numbers coming out, we'll be reaching out to your communities and looking to set up meetings. We'll be in Situate on February 5th. I just heard from Abington today. Abington will go out to Abington on April 3rd. And I have a tentative meeting scheduled with the interim town administrator and interim town accountant in Rockland also on February 5th. So we'll do the outreach. I'll obviously dialogue with members of the committee in terms of finding mutually agreeable times for you to be able to attend advisory committees or FinComs. More to be said next month. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
With all due respect, motion to adjourn?
Motion made by Whitman, second by Situate. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
No.